Ah, I hear trail food. Everything. If I'm hiking, I'm always hungry. And I'll say if you are on our Zoom meeting or signing in, these are just some fun before we start questions. So if you have a quick question that you want to ask, feel free to put it in the chat box. When it comes to food, I will say there are certain foods I've just had too much of on the trail, so now I can't stand it anymore. Like I cannot eat a Cliff Bar. I have eaten just one too many in my life, and so I'm done with that. I'm done with the old school power bars. But I still really like trail mix. I love kettle chips, beef jerky, sharp cheese. Actually, my favorite snack right now when I hike is I typically take dried fruit with me, and dates are delicious on trail. So I'll take dates and bring some sharp cheese. It's not going to get too greasy. And then another hiking food I like to bring is pre-cooked bacon. And I sort of wrap the bacon around the date and the cheese, remove the pit. That's key, right? Don't leave the pit in the date. And then I eat that as a little snack, and it's so filling, and it gives me really long lasting energy, and it tastes just sweet and salty and creamy. So that's sort of my current fave on the trail.
Ooh, that sounds good. I actually like those new figgy pops. So it's a fig base and they add different things to it. That's what I've been adding to my trail mix recently. But I like that idea of wrapping it all together.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to try that. Thank you. That's a great idea. How about another favorite? Favorite thing you like to see on the trail? You know, is there something that you specifically look for? Because I know, and the girls that I hike with, they know what I'm looking for. But do you have anything that really excites you when you're out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think I love seeing the wildlife and the animals, but also recently, just in order to become more knowledgeable about my surroundings and my environment, I at home have a nature journal where I use my field guides and I trace pictures of trees or flowers and write little facts about them so that when I go out into the forest, I'm more likely to recognize it. And when I can match a flower or plant or a tree that I've never seen before to my nature journal because of that work, I get really excited. So I was hiking last week in the Smokies, and I had drawn earlier this spring just the most beautiful flower called grass of Parnassus. And a lot of them, I'm like, oh, I remember seeing this. I remember where I saw it. But this I was unfamiliar with, and I was like, it's so beautiful and it's so detailed. And I was walking up on a high ridge in the Smokies last week, and I just stopped and I was like, that's it, you know? And I knew it because I had done, you know, this small activity and gotten to know it at home with the nature journal. So yeah, seeing flowers and learning that information and matching things up with my ID books is really a fun part of the experience for me right now.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that's something I took up because of COVID. I had more time to do just that.
Yeah.
Keep a nature journal, draw photos. You know, my passion is mushrooms right now. So, and certain plants. Like I was looking for Jack in the pulpit, and it took me like 3 years to finally find one in the wild. And I started screaming, and my girls, the women I was with, were like, "What?" They probably thought I saw a snake or something. But yeah, I understand that excitement when you finally see that thing in the woods. Another favorite, because you've been along the Appalachian Trail more than once. Do you have a favorite state?
Oh, it's been different every time. And again, if you're just joining us, these are just fun questions to get us started. We'll dive into the program a little after 6:30, but I'm not saying this because most of y'all are Virginia based, but if I'm like forced to answer this question, I do typically say Virginia is my favorite state. And it's, I mean, they say people get the Virginia blues because it's just such a long state and about a quarter of the trail is actually within Virginia. But I just think it's a really nice mix. Like you have the mountains and they're very scenic, but they're not too severe. Like they don't wear you out, and you have these beautiful, just pastoral, agricultural areas and a lot of history along the trail in Virginia too. So I just think it's just a nice mix of mountains and farmland, and it's really beautiful. And if any state's got to have over 500 miles, I'm glad it's Virginia.
Yeah, so are we actually. Awesome. I'm glad you hear that answer because we love our state. And I'm originally from New Jersey, and but I've stayed here because I just love it. I love the Shenandoah National Park, and the National Forest here is just a wonderful place to enjoy the outdoors, and it never disappoints, and there's so much variety and diversity. So
Yeah.
it's great.
And I would say Southwest Virginia in particular is just one of my favorite places in the entire country. Like Grayson Highlands, Mount Rogers, that whole area, Burke's Garden. It's really beautiful. So it's a nice part of the state too.
And we were actually going to be there this weekend, but we had to change our plans. But we are definitely going there soon.
Yeah,
because we want to see the ponies.
Yes, yeah, they're fun.
So what about what is the best or favorite gift of trail magic you've ever received?
Oh, that's a great question. So if folks are joining us for these just short get to know you questions, trail magic is an Appalachian Trail tradition or a long trail tradition where people will come and do kind things for hikers because they're on this long, hard journey. And most of the time, trail magic takes the form of food. Yes, it's a really easy need to meet. Hikers are already hungry. I think we've covered that twice. We've been talking for like 5 minutes. But yeah, there's been a lot of road crossings where I've received sandwiches, hot dogs. Someone set up a grill and is grilling hamburgers, brownies, fresh fruit, which is always nice because you usually don't carry that with you. But I think the thing that's touched me the most are when people who aren't familiar maybe with the trail and trail culture and this idea of trail magic, but they just meet you, whether it's on the trail, they're there for a day hike, or maybe you're in town doing grocery shopping or whatever it is, and you get to talking. And then there's been probably about 4 or 5 times in my life that someone said, you know, I don't know you and I know you don't know me, but I just like, if I can help you, if you need to stay at my house tonight, would you like to stay at my house? Like, you're welcome to come. And that to me is so countercultural. Like, it's just the absolute opposite of what we hear when it comes to stranger danger and us versus them and people not helping other people. So the idea that there are still individuals who are not even part of the trail community and they're willing to let a total stranger stay at their house, they'll serve you dinner, you take a shower. I mean, it's just happened a couple of times, but that to me is sort of, that's true magic. Like the fact that that still exists and the sense of vulnerability and trust that creates is something that's really unique and really special. So that'd be my top trail magic.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's, I've heard that from a couple of through hikers when that moment occurs. They expect it a little bit, I think, from the hiking community, but when somebody who's not comes through with an offer like that, it's just amazing. And then you really touch them, and now you know that maybe that will pull them into the community too in a much broader way, and maybe, you know, they'll share some more. So that's awesome too. Do you have, other than the Appalachian Trail, do you have any other trails that, or something local that's like your special little place to go to? I know some people don't like to disclose because they want to keep them to yourselves, but do you have a favorite special trail that you hike frequently?
I like to share because I think it's public land. So I like to tell people my favorite spots, and I'll always have special spots that are just harder to get to. So those are the spots that I feel like are protected and should be in a way. But you know, where I live, I'm actually closer to the Mountains to Sea Trail. I'm very close to the Appalachian Trail, but I'm even closer to the Mountains to Sea Trail, which is a 1,200-mile footpath that goes across the state of North Carolina. And it's just such a sweet local trail. It's very like the AT. It's not white rectangles, white blazes, but white circles. And so I can get on that with my kids, pre-work, post-work, on the weekend. And it's got some really beautiful scenery, but it's also really diverse. If you hike the whole thing, you're going through central North Carolina, you're going through farmland, and then you end up on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. So behind the AT, I think the Mountains to Sea Trail is my next favorite.
Awesome. Well, that's what I'm going to have to add to my list. I'm going to check it out. Have you heard about the latest trail that they're mapping out, that 12,000-mile perimeter trail around the United States?
No.
No? it was just something that I read yesterday, so I'm not surprised, but I was like, around, because I know there's one across the United States,
Yeah.
the American Discovery Trail. Do you have any of these celebrated trails still on your hiking list that you want to travel?
Yeah, that's why I was laughing. I was like, my husband, if he were here, he'd be like, don't tell her, don't tell her about a new trail. I do. There's a lot of trails that I would still like to hike. I'm sort of midway on a section hike for the Continental Divide Trail, and so I'd really like to finish that at some point. I'd really like to hike other places internationally, more in South America, and particularly also then in the Himalayas. I have no interest in climbing Mount Everest, none, but just to do some type of circuit hike over there would be something that I'd really be interested in. But I will say most of my hikes right now, most of what I'm trying to do is more regional and it's more local. My kids are 3 and 7. And this is sort of a very busy time for my work and my career. And I love getting to know this area. So I'm very happy hiking and hanging out in the Southeast and on the East Coast right now. But I think as my kids get older, I want to create space in my life so that I can tackle some of those longer trails in the US and also abroad.
Mm-hmm. Great, awesome. Well, we're at that time now, it's 6:35. Did we want to start the program or give a few more minutes for more people to join us?
We can go ahead and start. If they're joining in, my part is not quite the excitement of hearing you two talk, so I'll be glad to begin. So I want to welcome everybody here to the Jennifer Pharr Davis Trailblazer program. My name is Barbara Dickinson. I'm the Executive Director of the Friends of Handley Regional Library. The Friends have been around since 1977 to support the library. The public library system began with one branch in downtown Winchester, has expanded to 3 branches, one, the Bowman Library in Frederick County, and then the Clark County Library, and all the items in the library circulate and share among that part of the community. The Friends support the library, like most Friends group do, and began, of course, to raise money for programs and even as children's librarians. And now it continues with programs that we want to bring to the community that are free for the public, like this program now. We had originally planned to bring Jennifer and her family or bring them into the library on a book tour back in August as they were going through the community and to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the publication of her Becoming Odessa, which I imagine many of you have read. I have not, but I'm going to check it out at the library soon. So the pandemic came along, things changed, and we all tried to find ways to be creative and modify. And a little bit of a silver lining is we're able to, by the magic of Zoom, bring Jennifer into this community and probably reach more people than we might have been able to reach to come into the library in Winchester. A second part of that made the line even more silver was Susan Shearhart, who's also on the screen here. She's coming on as a co-host. She's going to help make this just a wonderful conversational event about hiking long trails. So I was really pleased that we're able to bring Susan in at this time for this program. Susan is the co-chair, to get her title correctly, co-chair of the Warren County Front Royal Appalachian Trail Community Committee. And she will help with the conversation this evening. I want to mention that the library, Handley Regional Library, has 3 of Jennifer's books, and you can check those out if you have a library card with us. I imagine if you're watching from someplace out, your library also has her books. Or our favorite indie bookstore here in Winchester, the Winchester Book Gallery, you can purchase her books there, and some will be autographed by Jennifer at the downtown bookstore. I have a little bit of business, of course, before I introduce Susan, who will do the more formal introduction of Jennifer. Funding, yes, has been provided by Virginia Humanities and the National Endowment for the Humanities as part of the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, Economic Stabilization Plan of 2020. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Susan Shearhart. Susan is a lifelong hiker, camper, self-described nature nerd. For the last 18 years, she's been served as a Boy Scout leader. This co-ed program, delivers leadership and project management skills acquisition by way of high adventure outdoor activities. She's also the founder and guide for the Trail Tribe, which is a local hiking and backpacking group for women. Her favorite pastime is spending time with her 3 young adult sons. They played a role, I imagine a big role, in how she earned her trail name Goldilocks and the 3 Bears. Susan.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Barbara, for that introduction, and thank you as well for the Handley Library Regional System and its partners for contributing to making this opportunity to catch up with Jennifer Pharr Davis. There are many words that can be used to describe Jennifer. She's an accomplished author. She has a number of books, and I'm just going to flash them right here so you can see them. Becoming Odessa, the 10-year anniversary, the book that started it all. And yes, I actually have an autographed copy.
Oh,
So,
awesome.
Yeah. And then, of course, the second one, Called Again. And this is also autographed, but this is about her record-setting through hike, which her husband also wrote a book about because he was her support person, which was also a great read. She was also National Geographic's Adventurer of the Year, and I saw you speak that night in their headquarters, which was such a treat to hear you talk about that. Yeah, it was a wonderful experience. So some other words to describe her. Yes, hiker, backpacker, record setter, trailblazer, guide, entrepreneur. She's the owner and operator of a very successful hiking company. She's a friend, a wife, and a mother. So she's a very busy woman and very accomplished. She's all those things and so much more. But I'd like to go back to a time when she was just Jennifer and maybe just a daughter and sister and a friend. So maybe you can describe for us how you became a hiker.
Yeah, absolutely. And Barbara and Susan, I want to say thank you and welcome everyone who's joined us on Zoom. I'm so grateful to be here. And part of the reason we have these friends asking the questions tonight is because we want this to feel super conversational and engaging, and we really want it to feel like we are just having a cup of coffee or tea and visiting. So if you're watching tonight and you have a question, Barbara and Susan are going to be looking at the chat box and trying to include the questions that we have during the talk, and then there's separate time at the end too. So we welcome you and we ask you to participate. I was not always a hiker, Susan, to get to your question. I didn't grow up doing much camping. I did a little bit of hiking with my family, but it wasn't a thing. It wasn't an activity that we really pursued. Like most kids now, I was just busy. I mean, kids are busy, right? With school and sports and extracurriculars. So it wasn't until I graduated from college and then I had that little moment of panic that was like, oh no, what am I going to do with my life, right? Like I thought they handed you the college diploma and along with it came the answers of who you were and where you were going to live and what you were going to do. And I received my degree and still needed time and a place to figure it out. And growing up in North Carolina, I had always heard of the Appalachian Trail. I had never set foot on it, but I knew it was really long. So several of you probably know it's about 2,190 miles long. It goes through 14 states between Georgia and Maine. And if you want to hike the entire trail at once, usually it takes about 5 or 6 months. And in my 21-year-old brain, I'm thinking, okay, this is an adventure. It sounds affordable. And it really was. I just used money from summer jobs and from babysitting. And again, in the youthful brain, I was like, oh, hiking is just walking. Like, how hard can this be? So I get my brother's old Boy Scout gear and then set off on my own from Georgia with the goal of walking all the way to Maine. And that is when I became a hiker. And it was hard. It was so much harder than I anticipated doing that type of through hike, especially as my first real experience, and super humbling and ultimately extremely life-changing. And Susan, if it's okay with you, because I mean, this journey, that first 5-month journey on the Appalachian Trail when I was 21, it totally just transformed me. And I could spend all night sharing stories from that initial journey. But because we don't have all night, I was thinking that maybe I could share one story from that first through hike. And one way to make this interactive or engaging is I'll let the participants, you can voice the story you want to hear about in the chat box. I'll give you 3 options. You can hear a story about a blizzard, number 1. You can hear a story about a lightning strike, number 2, or you can hear a story about a stalker, number 3. So let me know in the chat box, lightning, blizzard, or stalker. Blizzard, blizzard, stalker. Blizzard. I'm seeing a lot of soccer. I think that's supposed to be soccer. I'm seeing a lot of blizzard. Maybe it's been a hot day and we want to kind of cool down. Okay, we're just going with the quick typers here, y'all. We can't tally it up. So I saw blizzard. That's where we'll go. And this story happened in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, which it's funny. One of my first realizations when I began this initial journey, there was so much I learned on the trail, but one of the first things that just kind of clicked is you never realize how much it rains until you live outside, right? Like I was rained on 10 of the first 14 days. It was just constant. And so precipitation was a big part of this journey. And there's not a lot of thru hikers out there this year, this summer, but I've been thinking about people on the trail a lot because it seemed to rain an extra amount this year. And when you start the trail, I started in Georgia in March. So a lot of this rain was cold. A lot of times it came in the form of snow or sleet, and I was kind of used to that. But after a couple of weeks, I had gotten to the Smokies, and despite growing up in North Carolina, I had never been there before. And I had the highest expectations because I had just heard from everyone how amazing and majestic and beautiful the Smokies are. And I had also heard that the Great Smoky Mountain National Park is the most visited national park in the country. This is a true fact. Did you guys know that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. It gets more visitors than the Grand Canyon. It gets more visitors than Yellowstone. Yeah. Granted, like most of the visitors are just eating pancakes in Gatlinburg, and that technically counts for a park visit. But still, I was like, oh my gosh, all these people are coming to the park. There's got to be incredible views, and I want to see wildflowers, and maybe I'll see wildlife from a safe distance. And instead, the entire time I walked through the park, I was in there about 4 days, and I never had a single view. I really did not. It was cloudy, it was misty, it was rainy. Turns out there's a reason they call it the Smokies. The clouds really can just stick to the mountaintops. And my last night in the park, I just was cold and damp, and my tent was wet. And I rolled into a shelter where I was planning on spending the evening, and just exhausted, and put out my foam pad in the shelter, got in my sleeping bag. And I remember I just shivered and listened to the sound of rain falling on the shelter roof as I fell asleep. And then the next morning I woke up, and the first thought in my brain was like, oh, I don't hear rain on the roof anymore. It must have stopped. And then I just sat up and looked outside, and this is mid-April, and there was a foot of snow on the ground.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And now I'm panicked. So to this day, I will say cold is my Achilles heel when it comes to backpacking and hiking. Like I can handle desert, I can handle some dehydration, I can handle limited calories, I can handle rain, but cold is really what gets me. And so now here I am, I'm above 6,000 feet in the Smokies, I'm 17 miles from the closest road. There's just white everywhere I see, and I'm wearing all my clothes and I'm cold. And I also, because I was supposed to get out of the park that day, I didn't have much food left. I'll always remember this. See, food becomes this constant touch point when we discuss hiking, but I had a half a jar of peanut butter and 1 package of Pop-Tarts. That was what was left in my food sack. And so I was like, I gotta get out of here. Like I do not have what I need to get stuck in a snowstorm in the Smokies. And so I start packing up very hurriedly, and I see where I put my shoes the night before, and the laces are covered in like 2 inches of ice. So there's no way to like tie or untie, but I stomp my foot inside, I throw on my pack, and I start hiking down the trail. And one thing I love about the Appalachian Trail, especially compared to other footpaths that I've been on, is the AT is extremely well marked the whole way. It's a very well marked trail. But the only problem is it's marked really well the entire way with one symbol. And Susan, you know what that is. What is it?
Oh, the white rectangle?
Yeah. I have an example. So
in both directions too.
Both directions. It's so great. And white stands out so well until you're in a blizzard.
Exactly.
So now I don't see the trail. There's no footprints. I can't find the blazes. And I'm like, and I'm trying to use my resources to at least go in the right direction, like map and compass. And most of the time I will say I was in the forest and the trees somewhat protected me from the storm. But then I went on this exposed ridge line where all of a sudden I felt like the wind and sleet and snow, and it hurt. It just burned my face. And so instinctually I just ducked my head and I closed my left eye and I kept going as fast as I could to make it back inside the forest. And when I got there, I lifted my chin and something was wrong. I couldn't open my eye. It had frozen shut, which I didn't know that could happen, right? All these things are happening. I'm like, what? And I throw off my mitten and I have to pick icicles off of my eyelashes and wipe frozen crust from the corners of my eye until I could once again lift my eyelid and regain my sight. And I just remember, it's so interesting. I felt so scared and anxious and stressed. And in this moment, all I wanted to do was cry. And then of course I was like, well, I can't cry because my eye's just gonna freeze shut again. So I took a deep breath and I looked around and I got my bearings and I kept going. And at the end of the day, after several wrong turns, I made it to the park boundary where there's a road and a hiker hostel and I was safe. But this experience stands out to me for a lot of reasons. But one of the main ones is I think before my first hike, I always thought that hard work was going to get you out of situations that you didn't want to be in. And there was something very vivid about that experience that taught me it's not just about hard work, because in moments I was giving 100% effort and 100% energy. And if I was off trail or going the wrong direction, all that work was taking me farther away from where I wanted to go or where I wanted to be. And so I sort of recognized through that experience the importance of vision and direction and having resources and having guidance. And in a lot of ways, that story sort of summarizes like me starting my adult life as this 21-year-old and feeling scared and feeling anxious and not knowing where to go. And instead of just working hard, I was like, oh my gosh, okay, I need to see where I'm going. I need to have a plan and have a vision and set my course, or else I'm going to just spend a lot of effort and energy going somewhere I don't want to ultimately be. So it was a very important lesson that the trail taught me that was not fun, but I'm very grateful for it.
Right. That's an awesome story. And it really does set the tone for the title of your memoir, Becoming Odessa, because all of these experiences shape that becoming the person who recognized those lessons. And I don't know if you recognized them immediately or because you were probably just so relieved to get to safety and warmth and food. So it might have been something that you dwelled on later, but they were important lessons. So as you continue through life now, because you became Odessa, you were becoming Odessa, and you became her, do you find that you're still becoming there's a great author who wrote lines, we are as unfinished as the shoreline.
Sure.
So I was just wondering if, I know those lessons still guide you, but how have that continued to change you?
Well, first off, I felt so validated when Michelle Obama named her memoir Becoming. I was like, yes! Just me and Michelle with our Becoming books, you know. So, and that goes, I think, to the point that you know, whether you're a 21-year-old hiker or First Lady of the United States, we're always becoming. And your shoreline, you know, statement was much more beautiful than the way I typically put it. Cause I use the onion analogy. I'm like, we're just peeling off layers. Like every time you go hike, you just peel off another layer and you're sort of getting to this core. But I do think, so I certainly think it is a lifelong process, but in certain seasons you need certain things, right? And I know at 21 I just needed like that confidence to set my own path and say I really need to have like vision for my life. Like I don't want to just follow a path. Or on that, if I had told this stalker story, the main takeaway was that from that was I did not know how to communicate directly and honestly at 21, because it was this product of Southern culture that was all about pleasantries and niceties. And I really had to learn how to speak my truth and be honest with other people from the beginning. And that was something I needed to learn at that age. And is something that's, I think, enabled me to have healthier relationships and run my own business. And then again, different lessons at different points, and they're all good and they're all important. But also as a young woman, that first hike, I think the trail really changed my sense of self-image and beauty. And that was really critical, especially at that juncture for me, because, you know, I wouldn't have said I had a unhealthy self-image, but when I got on the trail, I started to realize how much billboards and magazines and commercials really did impact what I thought about my body and what I thought about beauty. And just to be away from it was so healthy. And I'm so grateful, honestly. Like, you know, I started hiking and backpacking before smartphones. So I really felt disconnected. I was not on any social media, and I was calling my parents from payphones in small towns. So just that ability to be removed and then see myself as a part of nature, which that had never happened. Like nature was out there, it was out the window and it was beautiful, but I was an observer. And then I hiked the trail and I was a participant and I was a part of nature and I was connected to it. So to be on the mountains, in the mountains and just look out to the horizon, or be in the forest and realize that, you know, biologically and spiritually, I was connected to everything that I could see. I mean, that made me feel so beautiful, like just deep down, and made me feel like there was nothing wrong with my body because I was a part of nature and it was all different. It all looked different. And also, you know, it gives you this feeling of like, I'm a little bit wild. Like you know, yeah. I am this like creature still a little bit, and I can climb these mountains. And so just, you know, believing that I was a part of nature and seeing myself through that lens, and then loving my body for what it could do, allowing it to do incredible things. Like those were lessons early on that were very, very important to me as a young woman in our culture. So yes, other lessons later on, but that's what's really stuck out to me when I was 21.
Yeah, and I think it was a wonderful experience, and I've known some other young women who through hiked at a young age as well. And it was interesting that it allowed them to actually see themselves for who they were.
Yeah.
Instead of how everybody else saw them. And I think that's probably a lesson some of us learn much later in life, but to learn it that young is really wonderful. It's a great way to, you know, settle in yourself and steer yourself for the rest of your life. So that's wonderful. That first through hike, how long did that take you to complete?
It was about 5 months. And I also want to just totally agree. I think you hit on such a good point of the value of doing it at a young age. I'm so grateful. And now I'm 37 and I'm reading a lot of memoirs by women who are more now in their 30s or 40s or 50s. And so many of them have deconstructed their life at this age once they realized that it's not what they wanted. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I don't feel that neat. Like I read these books, I'm like, these are good books. I don't want to blow up my life, because when I was 21, it was sort of like, that was when it blew up. That was when I was like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not going to follow the path of expectations. Like, I'm going to create something that's more meaningful to me and figure out who I am apart from those expectations. So yeah, it's not a long distance hike for every young woman or man, but as a youth in America, to have some experience that's apart from expectations, I think is hugely important.
So when you were planning, did you actually plan that through hike to last for a certain time period, or did you try to stay present in the moment of the hike and kind of take time when you needed to, if you needed more time, or stay longer at one place if you needed to? Like, so did you stick to the plan, or were you more free flowing with it, like staying in that moment?
Well, when I started, I just thought there was no way I could ever do it. Like, it was the impossible task. It was hiking to Maine. It was over 2,000 miles. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like, I'll be lucky to finish in 6 months. And so that was what I had budgeted. I just thought, okay, I'll be out here for 6 months. And I think I very early on was putting on, at first I was in decent shape, but then I got into trail shape, and I was just so nervous that I wasn't going to make it. I'm like, this is just the hardest thing ever, that I was putting in big days from the beginning, because it feels like you're never going to get to Maine, you know? So I will say, I think the second half was a little bit more relaxed for me pace wise, because I sort of had this confidence of like, well, I have made it halfway, and granted, it was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I have done that, and I'm way ahead of where I thought I would be schedule-wise. And then also I was more familiar with the South. I had never been up to New England, so when I got up there were more days off and time off and more just exploration of the region around the trail, not just the trails. So it was flexible, and I was planning to take 6 months, although it was a bit shorter than that.
I'm happy to hear that you took time to explore the region, because I think sometimes some of the commentary I hear is like, oh, well, they just stay on the footpath and there's so much that they miss.
Yeah. But
yet, if you do take your time, you can enjoy not just the trail and what you can see from the trail, but you can see what lies next to it as well. So that's awesome. So when you finally finished that through hike, did you have like the post-hike blues, or were you energized and ready to, just take life by the horns, so to speak?
I was ready to take like indoor plumbing and air conditioning and refrigerators by the horns. I was like, it was so hard. I mean, that's really my like standout memory from that first hike, is just getting to the end and feeling depleted. Like, I was so tired. I was so done. I was so happy. I was so proud of what I accomplished, but I never thought I would become a repeat long distance hiker. And I thought, okay, now is the time that, I feel more confident in who I am and where I want to go. And I really was more brave after this experience. Like, I moved, Winchester. I moved to Charlottesville, Virginia, because I liked that area, that part of the trail so much. I love the Shenandoah Valley. And I had a history major, and I thought, there's so much history there and so many museums, maybe I could go get a job. So I just moved there. I knew one person. I applied for jobs. I had a job within a week, and I was like, this is it now. Like, I'm in my field. I've got my job, and it was a great job, and I had a cute little place to live. And I was like, I'm doing it. I'm adulting, all the things. And then it was, as time passed, so I did not have the blues. I really didn't. But as time passed, it's just all I could think about was the trail. And it kind of snuck up on me. It was like, okay, well, maybe I could do one more hike. And my boss was so great and so supportive. And she was like, yes, you're 22, 23, go hike and come back. You can have your job again. And so I hiked the Pacific Crest Trail, saved up time and money. I did that. I came back to the museum. I worked some more. And then again, it was like, oh, I just still had the bug. And I was doing a lot on weekends and trying to get friends out too. And so it's just after a few years, but I was like, I loved my museum job. It was fantastic. I loved the people I worked with. I love history. It's just, I liked hiking even more. And so I was 24 and I was like, if I want to continue this in this field, in this history field, I probably need to go back to grad school for historic preservation or archaeology or something like that. But where my heart is on the trail. So it was actually at 24 where it's like, I'm going to start a hiking company because this is really what I love. And I really want to help other people get outside. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to go back to grad school. And it's been 12 years and I still tell myself that. Like during COVID, I was like, maybe it's time to go back to grad school, you know? Yeah, so that's sort of how it happened. And then being an entrepreneur and starting the business very slowly gave me some room and time to have some more adventures as well.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's interesting that you said that you got bit by the bug, but I think you really hit on it when you were talking about those first months on the trail and being a part of nature. It's like you were connected, but you went into relationship. Mm-hmm. And that's the one thing that I noticed when you spoke at the National Geographic headquarters. And you may not be aware of it, but you change a little bit when you talk about the trail. It's in your face, it's in your body language, it's even in the tone of your voice. And I knew at that moment that love that you have for the trail is like you're in a relationship with it. And when you're not on the trail, you miss it. It's okay because it's a part of who you are. It's that connectedness, but also that relationship. And that really came through the first time I heard you speak, and I like so related because I understood that feeling. And when I'm not on the trail, like it's calling, and you can hear it.
Yeah.
And like can't always put it off either. You have to go. So you talked about you still needed to go, and you did the Pacific Crest Trail, but then what idea or what kind of made you start thinking about a record-setting attempt? I mean, that's a big leap from just through hiking the trail. That's a huge accomplishment in and of itself.
Yeah, it's a good question. I also want to say I think you're spot on with the relationship, and I think that's one reason I haven't had the post-trail blues the way that some of my good friends have, is because after the first through hike, I didn't think it would continue the way it did, but since then, I think I've never seen the relationship ending. It's not like I'm going to keep doing big trails, but I just know that, I'm going to keep going out there in different ways. And the trails always met me at different seasons of life. It just changes. So it is very relational. And speaking of relationships, I had a trail boyfriend who was so great. And we broke up for very good reasons. And I was just so sad. And so I wanted to go do the long trail in Vermont. That had sort of been my plan. And I just wanted to hike hard. Like I wanted to hurt, I wanted to cry, I was heartbroken, and I needed to hike it out. Mm-hmm. So I set a long trail record to get over my trail boyfriend. And it worked. It really did. Like I got to the end and I felt very light and very free and positive. And that sort of gave me this idea of like, well, I'd really love to see what I could do on the Appalachian Trail. And didn't know if it would happen or not. Didn't know if I would have the opportunity to go back, because now it's at the point where I had started my business. And then soon after that, started dating this new guy who was even better. And that ended up being my husband. And, we got married, and I just started to feel a little bit more settled, honestly. And I knew that pockets for long hikes were decreasing. I didn't have as much time as I did in my early 20s. And the one thing I will say that kept me hopeful, that kept the door open, is that my husband was a public school teacher, and he had the summers off. And so in my mind, I'm kind of scheming, and I'm like, well, we can do summer things together. And he knew very early on that I, at some point, would love to do the Appalachian Trail again. Like I was like, this is my trail. This is my other love, by the way. And he was like, that's great, but it's your thing. It's not my thing. I don't think I ever want to hike the trail with you, just so you know. And I was like, okay, great. It's good to have that out in the open. But he sort of came up with this idea, knowing I wanted to do the Appalachian Trail again, that maybe I could hike it to try to set a record, and he could help me along the way. When I did the long trail in Vermont, I was all by myself, just crying, you know, backpacking. And now I was with Brew, and he's like, I don't want to hike the whole trail, but I hear there's some cool historic sites and like museums. Like we talked about the off-trail experience. He's like, he had a list of like every craft brewery, like within 20 miles of the trail. So he's like, maybe you hike and I visit battlefields and drink beer. So
hey, that sounds like a plan.
Right. So yeah, so we just kind of scheme up this like, okay, we have the summers, we could have a shorter adventure. You can help me, I can hike. This is what we're gonna do. So very soon after we got married, actually, we started the trail together up in Maine, and Brew helped me along the way and also visited, you know, sites along the trail that he wanted to see. And with his support, I finished the trail in 57 days and established a women's record on the Appalachian Trail. I averaged 38 miles a day, and we hiked the last mountain, Springer Mountain, together and touched the rock at the end. And when we did, I looked at my husband and I was just grinning. I was so happy. And he looked at me and he goes, we are never doing that again. Like, never. And at that point, I never thought we would. I was like, okay, that was it. Time to really go home and settle down some more and keep hiking. But like, you know, that's probably going to be the last AT hike for a while. But then it wasn't.
It wasn't. So how did you convince him?
Oh, it really wasn't that hard, surprisingly. 3 years passed, and you know, we worked and had shorter adventures. And then the kicker is we started talking about trying to have a family, which is something that we had both always hoped for and always wanted. But it just became really clear to me in that moment that if I was able to become a mom, my body would no longer be my own and my time would no longer be my own. It was going to drastically change things. And I wanted that, but it just stirred up something inside of me where I knew there was unfinished business on the trail, because what had sort of eaten at me, I was really grateful for, you know, that second Appalachian Trail experience and sharing it with Brew. But I knew as time passed, because as you said, Susan, you sort of unpack the trail experiences like once you get off, right? And I felt too good at the end, by the way. Like I was there smiling and happy. I didn't feel like I had just set a record. And as time passed, I realized that mentally, I just told myself what I was going to do that summer, not in a good way, not in a like pushing my boundaries or limits. I just said, there really is no women's record out there. Right. The men's record is 47 days. If I can finish 10 days behind the men, that's a really respectable women's record. And so I went out and that's just what I did. I told myself a woman was going to be 10 days behind the men's mark. And I wasn't really at any point asking my body what it could do, if that makes sense. I wasn't really like pushing myself. And I really don't like it off trail where I feel limited because of my, you know, gender or background or whatever it might be. And it's even worse when then you realize you've done it to yourself. Yeah. So what I didn't know is I didn't know what I was capable of on the Appalachian Trail. And that wasn't, you know, at 21, I thought, I don't even think I'm capable of finishing. Like, this is the impossible task. It's 2,000 miles, it's 6 months. But as the relationship, like you said, progressed, it was just sort of got to this point of this trail has given me so much. And there's something so raw about it. Like, I feel so free out there, but I went out and I sort of put these mental barriers in place. And I don't want to feel that. Like I just knew I would always have regrets or always have questions if I didn't go out and just like let go and see what I could do out there. So I asked Brew, it's funny because I have my virtual background, so you don't see my messy house, but I'm sitting on the couch where this happened. Like I looked at Brew and I said, well, would you maybe, what do you think, one more time, you know? And he looked at me and he was like, if you're asking do I want to help you go back and try to set an overall record on the Appalachian Trail? He's like, no, that's not what I want to do. That's not how I like to spend my summer. But then he followed it immediately and he said, but if it's really that important to you, then I'm going to be behind you 100%. So it was, a very, I think, special moment in our relationship. And it was really important to me. And so I was like, okay, like I wasn't going to let him like retract that. I was like, it's important. So we're doing it. So then they trained for months, and we went back up to try to set the overall record. And it was interesting because, the first time I didn't really get a whole lot of criticism. And this time, maybe because like social media was more prominent, or maybe because I was like going for the overall record, but I did hear a lot of negativity from trail communities. I think the runners, a lot of them thought that I was egocentric for thinking that I could compete with the guys, and I was going up against men who had won 100-mile races, and I'm this woman who's never won a 5K, so what business do I have going after their mark? And then on the other hand, hikers, a lot of them just don't understand why you would ever want to push yourself, or why you would want to hike 40 or 50 miles a day. And so I heard things like, oh, I'm whoring out the trail experience, I'm turning it into a racetrack. And it was all really hurtful. But, one of the things I love about hiking and just going out and training, even on the trail, is that we all have a lot of voices in our lives. Like, there's so much noise. And when you go out into the woods, the voices just go away. And the one thing I always felt and like heard internally when I was out there leading up to that summer, it's just like, I belong. Like once I found the trail, I always felt like I belonged out there. And my body was doing the miles that it would need to do. And so that was sort of my mantra that summer when I went out there. I said, I belong, I belong, I belong. But then, of course, it was so hard. And once again, I started in Maine, and then I was handed shin splints very early on, bad weather, really bad weather in the White Mountains, had a sleet storm the last week of June, dealt with hypothermia. And then on top of that, I just got really sick. So on day 12, this is sort of the critical moment. I tried very hard to quit. I was like, I have my answer. Like, we've come out and I've let it all out here, and I just cannot keep going. Like, I've never felt this bad. I was miserable. I was behind record pace. Like, there was no way in my mind we were gonna have a shot at the record. And I just remember at a road crossing, and I'm just crying and just begging my husband to take me to a hotel or just help me feel better. And he looked at me and he said, if you really want to quit, that's fine, but you just can't quit right now, because he said, right now you feel too bad to make a good decision. So, and he's a nice one. Like, I was so upset in this moment because like, he's the one that's, usually like giving hugs and offering empathy. And this wasn't an easy journey for him either. So I was so surprised, and he basically just left me there. And so I kept hiking, and just, again, was still sick, a little ticked off at my husband. And then eventually medicine kicked in, and I could hold in a little food and a little water. And I think the real turning point for me was this moment where I still didn't think I could set the record. Like, it was so far gone. I was like, nope, no way, no shot. But I started to think that maybe I could stay out there. And so then there was this question of like, well, am I out here for a record? And I kind of thought I was, because I told people I didn't want to limit myself. I thought maybe I was capable of the record, but when it was no longer an option, what I realized is that it was not the most important thing for me to be the best, but it was like deeply personal for me to find my best and to know what I could do. And if I could keep going, then I hadn't really found my answer, right?
Right.
So I chose to continue. Brew and I never even talked about it. Like, we just kept going. And
well, he knew you well enough to know that.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's another moment in our relationship, because we're very different in so many ways. And I'm the one who like grinds things out and pushes through things, and he is more sensitive and empathetic. And in that moment, I really feel like, and one of even the biblical words or the old words for love is to know, right? Like to know someone. And I'm like, he knew me better than I knew myself. Like I was circumstantially just hurting and not thinking clearly. And he knew me in that moment and allowed me to keep going. So yeah, I was really grateful for that. But in doing that, even and through that experience, we really let go of the record. So, going in and there's this word and terminology and record and blah, blah, blah. And now we call them FKTs, right? The liberation of this, and FKT stands for fastest known time. The liberation in this hike was letting go of all that and saying like, that's not why I'm out here. Like, I just want to know what my body can do. I'm beautiful. I'm wild. I'm part of nature. Here I am. Like, I want to feel light and fast one more time before becoming a mom. And so now it's just like, I am woman, hear me roar. Like I'm on the trail that I love with the man that I love doing what I love. And sure enough, as soon as we like kind of forget about the record, our miles go up, my pain goes down, enjoyment is much higher. And, by the time we were in your area, we were back on pace. And when we finished in 46 days. And so it was good enough ultimately to set the record, but like walking, hand in hand with my husband up that last mountain, like even in that moment, like it really wasn't about the record. We just touched that last rock. And now I'm like, again, grinning so big, but just sobbing. And my husband calls me an ugly crier, but I have the ugliest finishing photos. But here I am, and I just look at my husband, and then he looks at me, and he goes, "We are never doing that again." And it's like, okay, this time for real. Like, there will never be a need. Like, whatever we were out here to find, we got it. Like and walking off that mountain, it was a much different feeling, and it was very satisfying to have had that experience. And quite frankly, after that, I was ready to go slow. I was like, I want babies. I want to hike slow. Like, don't need to do the big miles. So yeah, but it's just one of those funny things where it's like every day I'm so grateful we had that experience. And then every day I'm so glad we're not doing it right now, Although during COVID, I'm kind of like, it feels like the trail record. Like, so hard. Where's the end of the trail?
Exactly. So it seems like that was the biggest challenge, was that mental block then. And that was something you had to clear, just like in these days. I think for most of us, it's like, it's just clearing those voices or whatever mental's going on that's preventing us from just being and maybe being grateful for the blessings that are right here.
Sure.
But, yeah.
And through that experience, and again, we're talking about the onion and the layers and what you need at different points. And I really realized how comparisons and anxiety over numbers can be so unhealthy. Like, that really struck me. And I still think about that as, a business professional and a mother. It's so easy to compare yourself to other small businesses, to other moms, and what you're not doing and why you don't have, higher margins or more social media likes. Like, that's just everyone's life, right? It's not just a trail record. It's just, I think we're bombarded by constant comparisons and numbers. And when that becomes the focus, when you're focusing externally on what other people are doing, you're losing sight of what you are capable of. Mm-hmm. And so that really, for me, through that experience, was a lesson in just like being present and optimizing what you can do and not worrying so much about what's happening externally. So I do think about that, especially now in COVID. It's just easy to see who has it easier than you. I mean, everyone without kids. That's not true. But, that's where you get like, and you're like, oh, I have young kids. It's so hard. Or businesses that can function at full capacity. I don't know. There's always all these people you look at and compare yourself to. And you just really, I try on a daily basis to just yeah, be on the trail that I love with the man that I love doing what I love and focus on that.
And that's great advice, because you write about the strength and resilience that you needed to achieve the record. And I believe you wrote about that in The Pursuit of Endurance. And it's interesting because when I read some of the reviews of the book, they said it's a must read for anyone wanting to start working at the big dreams they have up their sleeves. They also said that it's an empowering blueprint to building one's own endurance, a captivating narrative guidebook that will inspire readers to test their own limits on the trail and off. And I think what you just said is like the best advice that you could share today with anyone who has aspirations, whatever your dream is. Make sure it's your dream, and that it's your vision, and not comparing to what everybody else is doing, but you're like, be very clear about what you're doing, and your own strength and resilience, like draw down on yourself and move forward. Do you have any other words along those lines that you might share with others right now?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I have that book right here. So The Pursuit of Endurance is one of my more recent books, and I didn't write it because of the record. I honestly wrote it because I became a mom and had 2 kids, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, hiking 50 miles a day was training for motherhood.
Yes, it is.
You know, all the sleep deprivation, like everything I went through on the record, like all the, you know, physical discomfort, like, oh, it's just preparing me for motherhood. But what I was drawing out, and it certainly doesn't have to be a record to do this, but anyone who's a backpacker knows the joy of discomfort at some point, and also the lessons it brings. It is its own education, and it's one we really need right now because we live in a culture that's really focused on comfort. Like, we are in comfortable indoor areas a lot of time where the temperature is set, and we have ample food, and we have ample water, and I think it's a real disservice that we've taken discomfort out of our everyday existence, because then it's an inevitable part of life, right? And so then when it hits, and usually it hits us emotionally in our culture, we don't always have the tools or the confidence to deal with it. So basically, like what I had seen in this outdoor world were people who had had really extreme or challenging outdoor experiences, but they were applying whatever they learned to things off trail, whether it was divorce or debt or illness, or losing a loved one or injury, whatever it was like they had sort of gone through the school of discomfort, and they had built up these strengths or tools or tips that help them in their everyday life. So that's really what I was looking at. I was like, okay, we are people who know how to be uncomfortable. What did we learn, and why does it matter? And that's why I wanted it to be more than my story and my message. I was like, I know, you know, what my journey has been, but there are some other people who have different journeys, and their takeaways are different. And I sort of want to see what this collective wisdom has to say about resiliency. So anyways, that's what The Pursuit of Endurance is about. And this little, if I had to sum it up, I would encourage you to read it. But if I had to sum it up, if you're not going to read it, I'm going to share the 2 paragraphs that to me get to the heart of what it's all about. So here we go. Okay. When Brew and I are in the car and we pass a runner or walker on the sidewalk, it is natural for my husband to make comments about how fast or slow they're going and what their stride looks like. But my rule of thumb is that you can never judge someone else's pace or form, because you don't know how far they've come or what they're still planning to do. We all have our long trails, and most of them do not include much hiking or running. Outside the forest, our paths take the form of higher education, climbing out of debt, navigating a career, staying married, undergoing divorce, surviving tragedy, and coping with illness. And it helps us to not come to quick conclusions about other people's paths, and instead approach each individual with encouragement and compassion, because we might be on different trails, but we are all mid-journey.
Amen. So I almost don't want to say anything. I want to give a moment of silence to that because it was so beautifully written and spoken by you. So let's talk about this COVID impact for a moment, because it has impacted people tremendously. But one of the beautiful things I've seen is more and more people going out into nature to connect. But with it, people are bringing some of their anxiety and their fears as well about being in nature because they're not used to it.
Right.
They're afraid of wildlife. They're afraid of others.
Mm-hmm.
We've had some tragic stories. But what maybe words of encouragement do you have for those people who are just now entering these beautiful spaces that we've enjoyed for years and that are part of us? But how can we encourage them to really connect and feel that they belong as well?
Yeah, and I think it is a little more challenging during COVID, because my number one piece of advice for anyone who wants to start getting outdoors is like, go with someone who's been before, go with a friend, talk to your local hiking store, like look online for local hiking clubs. Like there's these resources all across the US, and there's these groups and communities, and if you can connect, then someone can share their experience with you on the trail and help you learn and help you feel comfortable. So with COVID, it is more challenging because a lot of times that resource does not feel accessible, or people don't want to go with someone who they don't know on the trail. So if that's not an option, the other thing I would say too is I think people get super psyched out by hiking. Like I talk to people who are like, no way, not me, I'm not doing it, no bears, And usually I like to ask, well, do you walk on the beach? And they're like, oh yeah, no, I'll do that, I'll walk on the beach. And Merriam-Webster defines hiking by taking a walk in a natural setting. So for some people, going into a national park by themselves on a trail they've never been on is outside their, their level of comfort, and potentially for good reason. But what I would ask or encourage is like, is there a greenway? Is there a river walk? Is there a beach? Is there some place that is outdoors where you feel safe and able to be in nature? Because it doesn't have to be the highest mountain. And it doesn't have to be cables and ladders and the hardest trail. Like start where you can and then build from there. Because a lot of times those rail trails or greenways or whatever they are that are in your neighborhoods and communities, they will lead to other trails. And I see people building their comfort level close to home and in their backyards and in their neighborhoods. And then that allows them to go a little further after that.
Great advice. And for those of you who are on at the beginning of the chat window, you'll see a list of resources that include our local trails. So in Warren County here and up in Winchester and even Clark County and some areas in between, we list those resources for those, real local places that you can go if you need to start out, in a more comfortable zone. And then you can, there's also resources for state and national spaces as well, parks or forests. So you do have some resources at your fingertips here to work your way up to those more backcountry experiences that maybe you'd like to have, but you just need to work up to. So why don't we also provide some other tips just as a new hiker going out there? Do you have any tips like things they should do to prepare or wear or bring, that sort of thing?
Sure. The American Hiking Society has a great list of 10 hiking essentials that you would want to take on a day hike or overnight trip. So you can check that out, and it's basic things. You want comfortable footwear, extra layers, food and water, map and compass. Don't rely on your cell phone to save you, but it is a good tool if you want to bring it. Rain jacket, first aid, all the basics. And then also I would recommend as another resource for people to check out Leave No Trace, Principles and Ethics. And it's a really thoughtful 7-step list of things that you should consider when you go outdoors. And obviously one of the things we want to do is, especially with this increased use this year and all the rain that we've been having, is you don't want to go out and enjoy the trail and then somehow leave it worse for someone else. So learning the very basic things of, you know, not to pick wildflowers, not to throw your apple core to the side of the trail. Yes, it's biodegradable and it's not the, you know, the worst thing ever, but what it does is it attracts animals to the trail and to campsites. And that often can be a problem that causes, you know, animals to be removed or put down. So just carrying out everything that you take in, trying to stay on the treadway of the trail, not walking into fragile environments, camping sustainably, not creating extra fire rings, all those things that are just good. Even if you're familiar or this is your first time, it's always a nice refresher to go through that before you go outdoors.
Great advice. And since we're talking about COVID and you mentioned the impact that the increased numbers of people going into nature are having on the environment, how are ways that you can recommend that we give back? In addition to following these principles of leave no trace, what are some other things that we can do to preserve or maintain the trail?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it depends on what season of life you're in. My favorite way to give back is to do trail work, which you go out with a group of friends and you actually work to make the trail better. You create water bars, whatever it is, put in reinforcements, and it's like hiking. You know, you're out in nature and you're with friends and you're getting dirty and it's great. But I know, like with young kids, that is something that I haven't been doing, because if I do have free time, I want to hike on my own. I don't have much free time. So I want to get out there on my own. I haven't been doing much trail work, but I can still give. Financially, our company, Blue Ridge Hiking Company, we have several days each year, which are donation days for our local trail club, which is the Carolina Mountain Club, or the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, or the Friends of the Mountains to Sea Trail. So getting involved in those organizations, becoming a member. Sometimes you can volunteer without going out and doing trail work. You can serve on boards. You can host a table at a local festival. I mean, there are so many ways to engage and be involved. So anything from hard physical labor to writing a check, anything in between, volunteering, spreading the good word. I also just think, you know, if you do know someone who's not familiar with the outdoors, especially if they culturally were not exposed to it growing up, and you have a relationship with them and you can take them out and then teach them your knowledge, like that is a way to give back to the trail community. And sharing things about leave no trace. So one thing I know, sometimes I go out and most trails are very clean, but sometimes you come to a roadside or whatever it is and there's more trash than you can carry out. And I always try to pick up one thing, because I just started to adapt this mindset of like, if we all just do one thing, right? That's how you hike the 2,000-mile trail. You take step after step after step. And sometimes, you know, no, all the time, like I personally cannot do it all, but I can do one thing. And so just adapting that mentality too, of like, okay, I can't give a lot, but I can give a little. I can't pick up all the trash, but I can pick up one thing. Like, I can't take everyone out there and teach them what to do, but I can take my neighbor. Like, whatever that one thing and one step is that you can do, I would encourage you to do that.
Great. And just for those of you who are local in this area, our local trail club that maintains the Appalachian Trail is the Potomac Appalachian Trail Club. So, and that is on that list of resources that was posted in the beginning of the chat window. So if you are interested in getting involved locally, you can go to their website and check out all the many opportunities that are available for you to do that. In addition to, of course, writing that check too, because that, if you can only do that, then that's your one thing. Awesome. Another question that maybe you might be able to give some advice on is any tips on how to approach individuals we might see on the trail that maybe could use some words of encouragement to you know, act differently or not throw that trash or what have you, because you know, I think we all come across situations where we want to say something, but like, you know, what's the gentlest, kindest way we can do that?
Right. don't be a jerk, right? I mean, like shaming someone is not going to make them excited about Leave No Trace. And I see that all the time. And it just makes me sad. And, you know, I think the best thing, like you see someone throw an apple core and you, not during COVID, but other times, like you run to go pick it up and you're like, hey, I'm going to get that because did you know? I think education is the best approach for sure. And leading by example and not shaming people and trying to bring it up organically in conversation without being didactic, without creating a set of rules for being outside right away. And I certainly don't like this idea of, you know, I think it can go too far to the point of sterilizing the wilderness, making us feel like we can't touch any tree beside us, or we can't gently lift a rock to look for a salamander underneath. That we are a part of nature, we should be able to engage. But certainly doing it with respect for others is important. The only time I get, I think, you know, real aggressive with my words, people playing at the top of waterfalls. I mean, that's what drives me crazy, right? Like Leave No Trace, I can be pretty kind about, but I'm just like, get back, get down, stop, don't do it. Like, I don't want to carry you out. So that's like the one time where I'm sort of more authoritative on the trail, I would say. But other than that, I think teaching by service and by example and through genuine conversation without trying to make other people feel bad or like they don't belong is the best way to go about it.
Great. Thank you. One of the things that you mentioned before we actually started the official part of the program is that COVID has given you an opportunity to guide again. Mm-hmm. I was wondering, when you guide groups and people, you know, realize who you are, do you ever get any surprising comments from them? Like, I mean, you are the fastest woman on the AT. So do they ever like express concern of keeping up with you, or do they have any interesting feedback for you or anything like that? That must be an interesting experience for you at this point.
Yeah, I think some people are, you know, if I am recognized or they find out what I've done or who I am, most people are very generous and complimentary about it. But yeah, occasionally you just get those snarky comments of, oh, good luck keeping up with her, or I like to enjoy my hike, you know, like, because I'm out here having a miserable time. So yeah, I'm pretty used to those at this point. And it, you know, it's not my issue. Like, I love the trail. I've hiked a ton of slow miles. I've hiked a ton with my kids. Doing the Appalachian Trail record, I never even ran. Like, my average pace was 3 miles per hour. So it's faster than my normal walking pace. I also didn't carry a pack and I was trying to set a record, but I could see the wildflowers. I could identify them. You know, it was a different way to experience the trail. And it was not a traditional thru hike. And I missed out on things because of that. But internally, I was able to, you know, dig pretty deep and discover some things about myself that I wouldn't have found on a traditional journey. So one's not better than the other. A thru hike isn't better than a section hike. A section hike's not better than the day hike. If you ask me who the best hikers are, I say, well, the people who love it the most and learn the most from the trail. That's the best hiker. You know, beyond that, why does it matter? So, yeah.
That's great. As a guide, do you have any advice to give perhaps some of our listeners who may be considering that as a profession themselves, you know, to be in the outdoor industry and maybe be guides? Is there particular things they should do training-wise or experiential-wise to be prepared to be, you know, very effective and a safe leader?
Yeah, that's a great question. Definitely getting some wilderness first aid, going through a WFA or wilderness first responder course is very important. Having CPR, having experience. But there's a lot of being a good guide that you can't teach. And it's just, you're with people and you're in customer service and you're intuiting everyone's needs. And for a lot of people, most of the people who come to our company, we work with all sorts and occasionally have these challenge hikes, but most of our clients are true beginners. And A lot of them have never peed in the woods before. So breaking down barriers, you know, and being comfortable sharing and teaching. And that's always like, at this point, I can anticipate a lot of what makes people uncomfortable outdoors. So just being very upfront about those issues and kind of breaking the seal and making sure people are comfortable talking about them, or at least knowing that you're comfortable talking about
Exactly.
them.
Okay.
But I see a lot of people not getting outdoors because they haven't had the education or instruction. They don't know about the gear. They're too nervous to ask about like pees, poops, periods, whatever it is. They feel guilty, like they shouldn't be able to leave their family or kids or work for 2 days to go backpacking or hiking. And then fear is a big mental barrier for people too. So those are some things I try to address like right away, like the education, the hygiene, the guilt, the fear. Those are barriers that we see time and time again. So trying to break those down is something that a good guide needs to do just as much as showing someone how to like throw a bear hang.
Right. Excellent. That's good advice, because I'm sure that's something that may have been presented in our chat window. And so I do want to encourage our listeners tonight to put some questions in the chat window. We do have one right now. Somebody's asking for some advice. They say that they've been section hiking the MST in North Carolina. They're almost 51 years of age, overweight with some health issues, and they're unsure as to whether or not they should even attempt something like what you've done on the AT, I'm assuming a through hike. They're a teacher, so extended weekends, summers, and holidays are their only time that they can go. They've backpacked a few times with friends, but never solo, and only for 2 nights and 3 days at a time. So what would be your best advice for them in terms of maybe pursuing a longer through hike?
Well, you know, I think when you do have pre-existing health concerns or conditions, definitely talk to your doctor. I'm not a licensed medical professional, so talk to your doctor. But then besides that, I would just encourage you, you don't want to do anything like what I've done. What you want to do is create your own experience. And yes, that may be a through hike, but you have to decide what you're comfortable with and go your own pace. And there's lots of ways to do the trail that can make it less difficult. And the ways to do that are to become a lightweight backpacker and make sure you get as much weight out of your pack as possible. To lower your miles and plan for a longer hike. If you flip-flop, which means start in the middle and hike to one end and then the other, you actually have a longer weather window than if you start at one end and hike to the other. So having support, if you have friends or family who are willing to maybe not hike with you, but could join you for a few days and shuttle you so that you can day hike, that's another way to lessen your weight. So I think strategy helps a lot. Like if you're like, okay, this is what I want to do, how do I do it successfully? You have to think strategically about it. And then also a through hike's great, but it's certainly not everything. I think it's really idealized in a lot of ways. My section hiker friends, they remember the trail a lot better typically than through hikers because they just savor it in pieces, right? So I also think going into things with an open mind and, you know, deciding what adventure is right for you. But even if you try to do a through hike and you make it 200 miles and then that's enough for you, that's 200 miles more than you would have done if you just sat at home. So I don't know. I think the trail mindset gets way too much. And maybe this is more of an East Coast thing too. I don't notice it quite as much out West, but it's like, I'm going to fail. How do I succeed? How do I do it? And I'm like, hiking 200 miles is awesome. Like that's not failing. Like you experienced 200 miles. Like that's so much more than what most people do. You were out there for a day. You were out there for a weekend. Like, something is better than nothing with trails. So that's my strongest advice is just, you know, define what you think you can do that will bring you the results you want. And then, remember that something's better than nothing when you go after it.
Thank you. Another question. that somebody asked if they were wondering if you ever solved your foot problem with white spots and sharp pain.
Yeah. I had the best socks in college for tennis. I played college tennis and I had these like thick cotton Thorlo socks that I was like, these are the best socks. And then I wore them on the trail and my feet just like disintegrated. Like it was so gross. They smelled so horrible and they were bleeding and cracked. And I don't know what they were circular indentions in the bottom of my foot. It was horrible, but it's amazing what wool and wool wicking socks will do. And as soon as I traded those out, I mean, Farm to Feet is just always what I wear now. That and Gold Bond powder. That's, you know, times when it's just wet and it rains and rains and rains and you're going through rivers and you're walking through dew-soaked grass every morning. Yeah, that Gold Bond is a lifesaver. So good socks, breathable shoes. I wear Astrals, which are super breathable, the Farm to Feet wool wicking socks, and then Gold Bond. That's sort of my magic combination that allows my feet to stay healthy on trail. But it's a little different for everyone, and you got to hike to figure it out.
Exactly, and I think that's like the first piece of advice I ever give people is take care of your feet, and they will take care of you for the rest of your trip. So get professionally fitted with your shoes and find what works for you, because everybody's experience is very individualistic and it has to be your preference. Another question that somebody's thrown up there is, what is your luxury item in your pack on backpacking trips? Because we all have a luxury item. What is yours?
It's a library talk. You'll appreciate this. It was just a book and journal for like ever. And I was so Spartan with my gear. I wasn't necessarily lightweight to start, but I was a minimalist. I was like, if I don't use it every day, I don't want to carry it. But I typically had a journal or a book, and I would tear out pages, you know, send them home, get rid of them as soon as I was done. But I think I'm getting a little bit more cush in my old age. I was out last week and I was like, my friends would laugh at me so hard because I had a pack cover, which I like used to never carry a pack cover for rain. I was like, why? It's going to get wet anyway. Why? I had a pack cover and I had a lightweight hiking umbrella. And I was like, I felt like such a diva. I was like, look at these things, but it helps. We opened a hiking shop, our hiking company did, and based a lot of the gear off of the best like cottage and lightweight items. And a lot of our guides were like, oh, we need this, we need this, we need this. And so I'm trying out a lot of things now because of the shop that some of my friends and our guides like swear by on the trail. And I don't know. I still think my personality on trail is to be a minimalist, but it was nice to have a hiking umbrella. I kind of liked it. But I don't carry a lot of luxury items unless I'm with my kids. And then it's like, sure. Like we carry paint sets, we carry marshmallows, we carry loveys, like they're stuffed animals. We carry dress up clothes, like whatever is going to keep them happy. That's not a luxury item. It's like what will keep my children happy on trail. And we pack a lot of that stuff for our family hikes. So we have a lot of accessories when we take the kids.
I think that's great advice. You know, how do families with young children go on these longer hikes? Like, how do you keep the children engaged and happy? You know, is it just what you bring? Is it involving them in the prep? Or do you make each one a certain type of adventure? Or what are we going to find? Like, it's all great advice. What do you think about families that have through hiked the AT together?
I think most of them who have done it in a really positive way. It's I never want to make anyone hike the Appalachian Trail where I don't feel like it's their decision. I just don't want to be responsible for someone else out there who doesn't wholeheartedly choose to be there or want to be there. And so it's not something that we're planning with our young kids. But I will say I've met a couple of families and read books by some of the families who have hiked with very young children. And the best quote, I interviewed actually one of the families, or Cindy Ross. She was amazing. She hiked a ton with her young kids and has beautiful books written about a lot of her trail experiences. She was really a female trailblazer and pioneer on a lot of these long distance trails, especially as a mom too. And she said, you know, a kid will not fake happy.
Right.
And she is 100% right. And my kids, if they are unhappy on trail, everyone like 200-yard vicinity knows that they are unhappy. And of the families I've seen and met on trail, their kids are into it and they are happy and they are out there enjoying the experience. I don't know that would be true for our family, but so I think it's unique. The same thing for dogs. Like not every dog is suited for a through hike, right? I think there's about 20% of dogs on trail that I'm like, yeah, like this dog is digging this and is also well trained enough to be out here. And so apparently our children are not well trained enough. or I don't, yeah. So who knows? We'll see. But yeah, I think to each their own. And a lot of the families who have done it, I really, really admire.
Yeah, so do I. I mean, I have had opportunity to backpack with my children, and it's a great experience. But I don't think the four of us would do a through hike. It's not for all of us. Exactly. It might be for me, but not for them. Yeah. So somebody asked about the hiking umbrella, if there was a specific brand or if it's just a lightweight umbrella you had in the house.
Yeah, either. Anything works, right? Because I'm all about whatever's affordable, whatever you have already. You don't need to reinvent the wheel, but there are some really good ultralight ones. I think both Gossamer Gear and Six Moon Designs have some good options. I think we sell the Six Moons Designs. That's what we have in our shop and potentially online, but it's about 6 ounces and it folds up. If I knew I was going to talk about it, I'd show you guys, but it folds up very small. And it holds up pretty well in wind. That's a thing with the lightweight ones. And honestly, depending on what trail I was on, I would use it more for shade potentially than actually rain. I don't necessarily mind getting wet, but it is nice. I'm more like heat sensitive the older I get, I find. So like hiking the Mountains to Sea Trail, there were a lot of road sections and having an umbrella to pop up my little parasol, for shade. That's another good use for it as well.
Awesome. And then on the gear topic as well, somebody wanted to know, since hiking equipment is expensive, or really backpacking equipment, what would you recommend to splurge on to get lighter weight? A sleeping pad, tent, sleeping bag, or some other item?
Okay, so I totally hear that. And I have great gear at this point, but before I had a hiking shop, I would just like one piece a year. Like each Christmas, I'd be like, okay, I'm getting nice poles. This year I'm getting my tent, so just, it can take some time to really transition into that nice lightweight gear. And that's fine because the other stuff works. Like when I started, I had an external frame pack, I had a synthetic sleeping bag, and I hiked with a mop stick. Okay. So like the good gear, it's great, but it doesn't mean you can't do it. It doesn't mean you're not going to enjoy yourself. And it doesn't mean you're not going to have fun and be successful out there. But when you are prioritizing gear, I actually tell people, especially if they're on a budget, I say, you know what, let's make sure you get the right shoes and the right pack first. And here's why. They're the things that you feel with every step. So I really feel like footwear and a proper pack with a good pack fit, it's hugely important. That's what's caused me the most discomfort on the trail are footwear issues and pack issues. So we really try to dial that in. And honestly, like if the pack fits well and carries weight properly, then having a few extra pounds in your tent or your sleeping bag, it's not gonna feel as bad as having a pack that doesn't fit or doesn't carry weight well with really ultra light things. So yes, I prioritize footwear and packs. And then definitely the easiest place to get weight out is not taking what you don't need with you. And then also the bigger the item is, usually the more weight you can save. So you're thinking along the right lines, like the pack, the tent, the sleeping bag, that's usually where you're gonna shave the most ounces if you trade it out. But really be a minimalist if you're worried about weight, and prioritize footwear and pack. That's where I would start.
Excellent, good advice. Two other questions. They're kind of in the same realm, I guess. One is about being in shape, but not hiker shape. And so this particular listener lives in the flat Midwest and was wondering if you had any ideas about getting into hiker shape, particularly because elevation, when she does get to hike it, kills her.
So first of all, just the fact that you acknowledge hiker shape is different means you're kind of ahead of the curve here. Most people don't realize that. I went into my hiking really overconfident because I was in good shape, but I wasn't in trail shape, just like you said. And it was, I mean, my legs were just shaking those first few days and I was so exhausted, and it is very different. And with our hiking company, we see people all the time who are like, you know, we have health forums and they're like, excellent condition, very physically fit, but they go to the gym, you know, 30 minutes a week, or they're coming from these flat areas and they're not used to exercising with weight on their back and they're not used to elevation. So when we think about trail fitness or getting in shape for backpacking or hiking in the mountains, the two things I really, really recommend are starting to add weight on your back. It can be a day pack, it can be a backpack, whatever you have at home, but start gradually putting weight in that. If you do go to the gym, wear it on the treadmill, wear it on the Stairmaster, get used to that weight, and then finding ways to find elevation gain and loss, whether it's going to the local football stadium, going to a skyscraper and doing the steps. My friend in Florida, she would hike the bridges. She's like, the only mountains we have are bridges. So she'd hike the bridges back and forth. But they're just such different muscles. Going up and down, you're engaging such different muscles in your legs than when you are hiking a flat trail. So finding that variety and terrain and elevation, and then adding weight. That's how you want to transition your current fitness level, which is great, which is definitely going to help. And that's going to transition it into something that'll work for the trail.
So the next question is kind of also about conditioning, but I think it's more mental preparation from going to like enjoying single day hikes, or sufferfests as one of our listeners called it, but they want to do more long distance adventures. So how do you get into that mindset of the day-to-day getting up and hiking, like that day-to-day after that? So to be more consistent, to get those magic long days, as they call them.
Yeah, well, I think you know, and when you think about long trails and through hikes, they can be so intimidating. But if you can go out for a weekend, like if you can go out for a 3-day backpacking trip without a resupply, most of the Appalachian Trail is a 3-day backpacking trip after a 3-day backpacking trip after a 3-day backpacking trip. So it's a great question. And again, if you have the flexibility and ability to go out for longer periods of time to train physically and mentally for that, that's great. Like going out for up to a week, that would be really great preparation for a long trail. But there's a lot of people who don't do that. And I think going in with the understanding and expectation that if you start slow, you can start to get in shape on the trail. And again, just being present in your environment and saying, this is my home and this is where I live. And I think the trail mentality used to be easier, and technology's made it harder, because now with the smartphone, I think a lot of hikers who are out there, they're constantly seeing what people are doing off trail, right? But really, when you get out there, if you just have the mindset that this is my adventure, this is my home, I'm out here until I finish, or I can't go any farther. And, you know, it's just one step at a time. Just like holding that mindset can really be helpful. But yeah, your body gets used to it, especially when you tell it it's the only option.
Okay. We have really 2 questions left, but we're already at that 8 o'clock hour. So I don't know if we want to answer them, or if we wanted to answer them separately, like individually.
You should. Why don't you ask them? I'll answer real fast. This is just ground.
Okay, so maybe this is a quick one. How did you best deal with any fear of being alone at night?
I hiked more, so I was really tired, and then I fell asleep very quickly.
Excellent. And then from a fellow mom who has a young child herself, and she has dreams of hiking the entire AT, and she feels guilty leaving her child to do that. Is there anything mom to mom that you can recommend to her as a mom who loves to hike and has these dreams?
Yeah, I would say the trail's not going anywhere. You know, the trail will be there, and it's going to be there for you in a season of life where you have more time and flexibility. In the meantime, you don't have to do 2,000 miles to reap the benefits of spending time outdoors and in nature. Everyone has a different family setup. My husband and I, our arrangement with young children is that we give each other 2 weeks a year for personal adventures. And that sort of satisfies for us this longing and craving to be outdoors. And still you face the same, you know, issues of feeling guilty or like you can't get away. And I'm very fortunate to have a partner who we both prioritize that, and not everyone has it. But I will say, just like on the trail, there's different seasons and there's different seasons of life. And the people who often enjoy and love the trail the most are the ones who have to wait, whether it's because of raising kids or a career or whatever it is, until they actually get to do the whole thing. But it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Great advice. And I believe that's all of the questions that we were presented with. So do you have any closing words that you'd like to share before we say our final good nights?
Just thank you. This has been so awesome. And Susan and Barbara, y'all have set up a really wonderful program. And you live in a beautiful area to hike. So I hope this encourages everyone to get outdoors and to start hiking. And yeah, especially in this season. I mean, in some ways it's very affirming to be like, see what we were saying for so long about like hiking, keeping us sane and healthy. Like this COVID thing is like proving it. So finding ways to get outside now in a way that's healthy and works for you is super important, and something that we're all trying to do. So keep doing it. We'll get through it.
Well, thank you, Jennifer, because once again, you're sharing your experiences in such an open way, and your wisdom and sense of humor. So this was fun. And I'm sure that all of us now are a little more energized and eager to get right back out to the trail that we love. So I hope that everybody, for this weekend, we've got good weather coming. Maybe not so much today, but it is coming. So go find your trail and hike it, and check out the resources we have listed there, or go to the local outfitter for information, or you know, just walk out your door, because adventure lies right there as well. Barbara, did you have anything else you'd like to say?
I want to thank you, Susan, for coming and helping Jennifer. It's a wonderful conversation. I second your choice. Go outside. We have recorded this, so we'll have it on the library's YouTube channel for a week. So if you know anybody that missed the opportunity, they can just contact me or come to the library and find our YouTube channel and catch all the good information and wonderful, exciting, compelling time. So I really enjoyed it. I'm a beginner hiker, so I'll be out this weekend.
Awesome. And then anybody that goes out for an adventure this weekend, if you'd like to share your adventure, feel free to go on our Warren County Front Royal Appalachian Trail Facebook page and post your pictures. Let us know where you went hiking this weekend, the trail name, and if you have a funny story or anything you'd like to share, go ahead. We'd love to see your adventures. And with that, we sign off. Jennifer, thank you again. It was a great pleasure.
Thank you, Susan. Thanks, Barbara. We'll see you down the trail.
Thank you.
Happy trails, y'all.